Devotees' Experiences of Sri Sai Baba, written by Sri H. H. Narasimha Swamiji. Chapter 1. Justice M. B. Rege, Saraswat, aged about 50, Interior of India, 11th June 1936. I look upon Sri Sai Baba as the creator, preserver, and destroyer. I did so before his Mahasamadhi in 1918, and I do so now. To me, he has not gone, he is even now. To me, he had no limitations. Of course, when he was with us, there was this fleshy tabernacle that was prominently brought to our notice at times, but mostly the infinite aspect of his was what remained before me. I thought of him as a mental or spiritual image in which the finite blended very perfectly, yet allowing the finite to appear before us at times. Now that the body has been cast off, the infinite alone remains as Sai Baba. I am not after metaphysics or philosophical conundrums. Sai Baba occasionally talked in mystic language and used parables freely, which, however, were construed in widely different ways by different listeners. Once he talked to me in the mystic way and asked me whether I understood him. I said no. Others were present then. After they left, I told him that I did not grasp mystic utterances and that if he intended that I should grasp anything, he should speak to me in plain terms. After that, he spoke to me only in plain terms and not in parables. A short account of myself is necessary to show how I came to Sai Baba and how he filled my life and became mine all in all. Our family god is Durga, Sant Durga of Goa, a Bhadra form and not a Rudra form. I used to worship her and pray that she might ever keep me happy. Later, when I was about 8 years old, I had my sacred thread ceremony and learnt my Gayatri and Sandhya. These I had regard for. I was thus naturally led on from Durga to another form of God, that is Narayana or Vishnu. Vishnu, as pictured in Dhruva Narayana, made a deep impression on me, and I constantly meditated on that picture. When I concentrated or tried to concentrate on Vishnu, Dhruva's figure frequently obtruded, and so I cut off that portion of the picture and continued my meditation. I made a special appeal that in that blank space in the picture, that is, in that vacancy, Vishnu should place me. I had even as a boy practiced asana and pranayama. I could pass 1 or 2 hours sitting in Padmasana or Siddhasana and concentrate for at least 15 minutes, a single picture holding the entire field for my attention. I did all this without a guru. I succeeded in pranayama also to some extent. In this way, my meditation on Vishnu or Narayana was fairly intense. This continued till my 21st year, that is, in 1910, one day, I was either sleeping and had dreams or I had trance visions. I cannot say what they were, but the following 3 experiences I had in the course of one night. As I was in the lying posture on my bed, I felt a change. I was perceiving that the body lay separate and I was disengaged from it, disconnected or unconnected. I was different from the body, and in front of me stood the figure of Vishnu Narayana. This ended, and in about an hour later, a second incident followed. Again, my body lay there on the bed. I was outside it. Sri Vishnu Narayana was standing before me, and by his side stood another figure. Sri Vishnu addressed me and pointing to the other figure said, "The Sai Baba of Shirdi is your man. You must resort to him." The third incident or vision followed soon after. After about the same interval perhaps, I felt I was moving in some strange way. It was like levitation in the air. I came or was carried thus to a village. I found one person there and I asked him what village that was. He said it was Shirdi. I asked him, "Is there any person named Sai Baba here?" "Yes," he answered. "Come and see." I was taken to the mosque. There I saw Sai Baba. I was seated with legs outstretched. I went and reverentially placed my head on his feet. He got up and said, "Do you take my darshan? I am your debtor. I must take your darshan." And he placed his head on my feet. Then we parted. These visions impressed me greatly. Before that time, I had seen a picture of Sai Baba in the usual seated posture, and I knew nothing more about him. I did not then know that Baba often sat with both legs outstretched. Sometime later, I started on my first visit to Baba and Shirdi and tried to verify my visions and to see if Sai Baba was my destined soul guru as indicated in them. When I went to Sai Baba at the mosque, there were many others with him. I went and prostrated, placing my head on his feet. He then said, "What? Do you worship a man?" At once I retreated some distance and sat. I felt the rebuff very keenly. I had, it is true, my scholastic notions that men should not be worshipped, and thought Sai Baba was hitting at me for going to him, with such notions lingering in my head. Between two stools, I was coming to the ground. My scholastic idea of not worshipping any human being had been undermined and practically sacrificed. But I had not been accepted as a devotee by the Guru as I expected from my visions. I was deeply mortified and continued to sit for some hours. Then all had cleared off, leaving Baba alone on the floor of the mosque. That was in the afternoon. It was believed that none should go to Baba at that time, lest any serious harm should be inflicted as a penalty for the intrusion. But in my state of mind, such harm did not deter me. The main or single hope with which I had gone to Shirdi seemed to be blasted. What more was there to fear? He might beat me and crack my skull. Let him. With such ideas, I went nearer and nearer to the place where Baba sat. While I was some yards off, Baba gently beckoned to me to approach him. Thus encouraged, I went and placed my head on his feet. He at once hugged me, bade me sit close to him, and thus addressed me, "You are my child. When others, that is strangers, are in the company, we keep the children off." My apparent rejection or expulsion earlier in the day having been thus satisfactorily explained, I felt the full force of his deep and intense love for me, and my heart responded to it. There was my Saviour, my Guru, the man of my destiny, found at last. Baba told me to go and put up with Ai, Ramakrishni as he called her. I went up. Ever since that day, up to the end of her life, whenever I went to Shirdi, Ai was my residence, and except to go to Sai Baba, I would never leave Ai's residence while I was at Shirdi. Ai was a noble and affectionate person, an Ai or mother indeed. She was from the very first treated by me as my mother, and she loved me as if I was her son. She used to get a roti from Baba as prasad, on which alone she was living, and Baba used to send her an additional roti for me. Sometimes the additional roti received at Ai's would indicate to her that I was on the way to Shirdi and would soon arrive. Ai's devotion to Sai Baba was very intense and passionate. She lived only for Sai Baba, and her delight was to carry out everything that he wanted or was needed for the samsthan, that is, institution and devotees. I find that Baba's instruction and help to me came through Ai in a peculiar way. I was so open hearted and kind that from the first day I could confide all my views and plans to her, and she revealed her ideas and plans to me. As for religious progress, she said that we should so act that no other person should guess what we were doing and how we were getting on. Secrecy is essential for the success or perfect fruition of spiritual effort. This was, of course, Baba's practice and precept. Jinne kamaya une chupaya, Kabir. As for religious exercise, I was an excellent singer with a divinely charming voice and a good knowledge of music. She could play on the sitar also. I had a good ear for music and I easily attained manolaya. Manolaya, that is absorption or infused contemplation. I was wrapped in the music when I listened to it. But as we went on, one day we talked about what form our religious exercise should take. Songs and hymns were good in their way, but they attracted attention of the outside public too much and were not in any case sufficient for our inward course. Then we agreed that japa was the proper step for us. What particular name should be used by us for japa was the important question. This devotee has also stated that Baba had musical gifts and musical appreciation, especially of bhajana kirtans, that Baba sent for him at midnight and made him sing and corrected mistakes in ragas and gave him some musical tips, and that Baba himself sang in a charming voice. I said that many use the name of Vitthal, Ram, etc., but that so far as she was concerned, Sai was her God and that name was sufficient for her, while I might go on with the name of Vitthal, etc., if I chose. I replied that I had not seen Vitthal, and what was good for her was good for me, and that I should go on taking Sai's name. So we sat on, facing each other and repeating to ourselves our chosen Guru God's name for about an hour. Later in the day, Sai Baba sent for me and asked me what I had been doing in the morning. Japa, I said. Of what name? He asked. Of my God, I replied. What is your God? Was Sai Baba's next query. I simply replied, You know it. And he smiled and said, That's right. Thus, this japa was really the japa that he expressly approved and had perhaps silently started through I, unperceived by either I or myself. Japa being the sadhana approved of in my case, the question may be put, what is the sadhya or goal that Sai Baba approved of as the goal of life? What should a man aim at and reach at the end of his life? Just as the sadhana was indirectly started by Baba, the sadhya or goal also was indirectly revealed. It was patent from all he said and did. It was through love to reach God in any form, especially in the beloved form of the loving Guru, and intensely, nay passionately to love him. This is what we did and what he made us to do. That is, what he enabled or drew us to do by his own intense and wonderful love for us. Some may set a great store by sakshatkara or revelation in physical form of the object or worship as the be-all and end-all of all religion. But I do not. As I intently meditated on Baba, I had Baba's vision at the meditation. I, however, treated that appearance as a matter of secondary or minor importance. I did not want Baba to be outside of me. I said to Baba that I wanted him to come in and to be me. What I meant by me is this. The self, that is I, is compounded of two substances, one the gross body and the other the finer or subtler. In the finer, we have the baser element or part, and the nobler or higher. Our self, God Vitthal, and other entities are all the reflections of the real. And so, I should rise up to be Vitthal or Sai. Vitthal or Sai should come into me and take the place of my higher part. That is what I wanted to arrive at, and so was not satisfied with seeing Sai Baba as external to me in my meditation or contemplation. I have not regularly studied even Gita up to this time. I did not care for spiritual study in my earlier days either, and so I do not go into much detail on the question of the exact description of the further stages or final stage of meditation. One Guru Purnima day, numerous devotees came to Sai Baba and as usual placed a book before him so that he might return it with his Ashirvad or blessing for them to study it with profit and benefit. Sai Baba, however, took up a book brought by one man and gave it to another, as he often does. On that occasion, everyone had a book in hand except myself. Baba then looked at me and said, pointing to the books, "In these books they want to find God, Brahma. There is, however, Brahma, that is, whirl, confusion, or delusion in these books. You are all right. Do not read books, but keep me in your heart. If you unify or harmonize head and heart, that is enough." So I have not been indulging in any regular study of religious books. I content myself with what has led me so far and with what has been achieved. Some of my experiences bear upon the question what I should do. Though I have been intensely loving Sri Sai, I have not been able at times to do a good service to Baba as others do. It was probably in 1912 that I went up to Shirdi on some festive occasion, Guru Purnima maybe. I saw the devotees at Manmat each having a grand basket with flower garlands, etc. I was much pained to note that I had forgotten to take a flower garland when I was going to my Guru, who was everything to me. We all went to Shirdi, and at the mosque I found Baba was under a great weight of flower garlands, and it pained me again that I had not a garland to give him. Baba lifted up a bundle of the garlands with his hand and said, "All these are yours." How kind of Baba! What love was his to me, all forgiving and all forgetting love. About the same year, 1912, I had taken ₹100 with me to Shirdi in my pocket. Sai Baba asked me for dakshina, ₹40. I readily gave it. A little later, he asked me for another ₹40, and that too was given with equal readiness and joy. Finally, he asked me for the remaining 20, and that also I gave him. I was happy to give him all that, though I was left without a pie in the result. Then again, Baba sent for me and asked me for dakshina. I said I had nothing to give. Then he suggested that I should go and get money from some others. I agreed but told Baba that if he should indicate whom I was to go, I would gladly go and ask him. Baba said, "Go to Shama." I went to Mr. Madhavrao Deshpande, Shama, and told him that what took place and asked him for money. He replied that I had not understood Baba right. "Does Baba care a rap for your rupees?" he said. "No, what he wants is your mind and heart, your time and soul to be devoted to him. That is his meaning." I went back to Baba and reported what Shama had said. Then Baba smiled and said, "Go to Dikshit and ask him." I went to Mr. Dikshit and told him of what Baba had bidden me to do. He then replied that Baba's direction to me had to be understood in the circumstances as a lesson to me that I should not feel absence of money or the begging for money or for anything else to be a humiliation, and that I should not esteem myself to be above begging. I went back and reported Dikshit's reply to Baba. He smiled and then asked me to go to Nana Sahib Chandorkar and ask him for a loan. I went to Khandoba's temple where Nana Sahib Chandorkar was reading some religious books with the learnt K. Upasani Shastri. I went and told Nana Sahib all that had occurred and Baba's order that I should approach him for money. Nana Sahib at once showed his worldly wisdom. He said that he knew how delicate the situation was. When Baba asked for dakshina and there was nothing to be given to him to satisfy him, and that I should learn his plans and his ways. Whenever I go to Shirdi, he said, I start with a certain sum and leave a half at Kopagaon, that is, on this occasion I came with rupees 200, out of which I left rupees 100 at Kopargaon and came down to Shirdi with only rupees 100. It is very painful to say no when Baba asks for money. So I go on giving dakshina out of the stock in hand to Baba, and when it is exhausted, I send for the reserve at Kopargaon. You must act like this. I went back to Baba and then told him what Nana said. While I sat there, Baba sent for Nana and asked him for dakshina of rupees 40. He readily gave and went away. Again he sent for him and asked for rupees 40 more. That was paid, and again Nana was sent for, and the last amount was paid up, and at once he sent someone to Kopagaon for his reserve fund. Then Baba at once wanted more. Nana felt humiliated at having to say no, as there was no time for the Kopagaon reserve to arrive. The lesson that then taught to him, to me, and to all was that it was presumption on the part of anyone to think that he was the great providence supplying the needs of Baba, or that anyone could supply all that Baba might ask for. This Baba showed me how differently the demand for dakshina was interpreted by devotees. The real explanation of Baba's demand in this case was not what Shama, Dikshit, or Nana said it was. It was evidently to teach lessons to me, Nana, etc. Baba really cared nothing for money or for presents. What he really wanted was love, deep, intense, passionate, wholehearted love. To give him that was my aim. He knew it and read it in my heart and responded to it as only he could respond. It was probably in 1915, Ramanavami, when intending to go to Shirdi, I went into Indore Cloth Bazaar to fix upon a present worthy of being presented to Baba. I found a fine lace embroidered muslin of the Dakka type produced at Chandere. It was some 5 feet square with embroidered body and 8 or 9 inches of lace border all round. It was very nice and worth the 85 rupees I paid for it. It could be folded into 6 into 6 into 1 packet. I took it with me to Shirdi and kept it inside my shirt. Devotees usually go and present Baba with cloth in order that the same may be returned to them with Baba's blessings, and the same is returned to them. In my case, I had made up my mind that if Baba cared for my love, which knew no difference between him and me, he should not return the same to me, but should retain it and wear it. When each devotee went and presented his cloth, it would be openly bestowed and placed on Baba, and then at the end the attendants would call out, "Whose is this?" and return it. In order to avoid the return, I had taken my tiny packet, and when I bowed to Baba, I slyly shoved the packet under his mattress gadi. When all clothes were taken and returned, none noticed what was beneath the gadi. Baba got up and said, Clear off all that lies on the gadi and dust it. When the mattress was removed, there was the muslin packet. Baba picked it up and said, "Hello, what is this, muslin?" and spread it out and said, "I'm not going to return this. This is mine." He then put it round his body and said to me, "Don't I look nice in this?" I was immensely happy as his loving heart had fulfilled my request for the acceptance and retention of the present, as an index of the fact that I was not different from him and that I and he were one. I was not different from him. I and he were really one. Our unity was expressly granted in another way and at another time by Baba about the same year. I had gone to Shirdi and was staying as usual at Ai's. In the afternoon, when Sai Baba was alone, he sent someone to fetch me, and after dismissing the messenger from his presence, he was very kind to me, made me sit close to him, embraced me, and said, "The key of my treasury is now placed in your hands. Ask anything you want, that is, rupees 5 or rupees 100 a month, or what you like, and I will give it to you." I felt at once that this was a temptation and declined to ask for anything. Sai Baba knew what was necessary, good or useful for me, and it was for him to decide and give or withhold. It was not for me to ask. Seeing my disinclination to ask, he held me by my chin and coaxed me into asking him for something. Then I asked, "Is it agreed, Baba, that you will grant anything I ask for?" "Yes," was his answer. "Then, Baba," I replied, "I want this, in this and in any future birth that may befall on me, you should never part from me. You should always be with me." And he patted joyously and said, "Yes, I shall be with you, inside you and outside you, whatever you may be or do." I was supremely happy. I feel that he is always with me. At times, he visibly shows his form to reassure me or guide me. Many years later, I lost a child in a building which had numerous occupants. My wife was greatly depressed and started weeping. I assured her that Baba did only what was good for us and had taken away that child, and so we should not weep and attract a crowd. I asked her to sleep till morning when the funeral would take place. She could not bear the sight of the corpse, and so I took it on myself, and she went to lie down. Then, when I had the corpse on my lap, Baba appeared to me, took me out, and said, "Do you want me or the dead child? Choose. You cannot have both. If you want me to revive the child, I will, but then you will have me no more with you. If you do not want revival, you will have many children in due course." I had no hesitation in telling him that I wanted him. "Then do not grieve," he said, and vanished. It is thus he encourages me when the occasion needs it, even by his presence. All my needs are met by Baba's grace. I do not trouble him with prayers for my worldly gains or support. I have my income and property and insurance, and I am content with the provision for the present and future. If any need arises, I find that somehow the money comes up. I have nothing to complain of. Finally, if I am asked what I would suggest to one who wished to find out how he, not having met Sai Baba in the flesh, could make himself a devotee of Sai Baba and get his help, my answer will be that he should sit wholeheartedly and try to pour his heart and love to Sai Baba. It is not essential that he should go to Shirdi for that purpose. Though Shirdi associations are undoubtedly helpful, all that he should do is to transcend the senses and concentrate with love on Sai Baba. he would surely reach and obtain the help of Sai Baba to obtain all that he is fit to achieve or receive. Baba does not prescribe one uniform spiritual exercise or practice for all. He suits himself to the stage, circumstances, and conditions of each. If you are a Rama Bhakta, keep to Rama. If you want only Allah, keep to Allah, is his advice. He is always impartial. Sometimes he pronounced or got someone to pronounce Fatah over Hindu offerings also. There was a rule no sharp distinction or antagonism between Hindus' devotion to him and Mohammedans' devotion to him. There were, however, some exceptions. One I will mention. There were two Rohilas about 1916 who came to Shirdi and became devoted to Sai Baba. The elder one was constantly with Baba and used to read the Quran, at night especially, sitting at the feet of Baba. He declared that Baba was Paigambar, that is God, and showed him great reverence. At times he said that Baba, though he was Paigambar, was still teaching heterodox doctrine. Baba's allowing the din of noonday aarti with its music in the mosque, allowing himself to be worshipped as a god there, and partaking of food offered to idols were heterodox. And this Rohila mentioned his objections to Baba. But Baba only smiled and said, "All that is Allah." This was one of the moods. In some moods, he would say, "We are all the creations of God Allah." In other moods, he would say, "I am God." This, of course, was extreme heterodoxy in this Rohila's view. So this Rohila one day declared that although Sai Baba was Paigambar, yet his doctrine was wrong, and so he, the Rohila, would make short work of him and his doctrine. One day, as Sai Baba was going out walking, the Rohila came up from behind with a stout club in his right hand and reaching striking distance. Baba turned towards him and touching or seizing his left wrist, cast a glance at him, beneath which the poor Rohila cowered and sank like a lump of lead, powerless to lift his club or even to lift himself. Baba left him there and went away. Later, the man had to be raised up with someone's help. In a few days, the man took leave of Baba and left Shirdi for good, never to return. The other Rohila was not intolerant but was rendering humble service in the samsthan. As for intolerance that was not confined to this Muslim devotee, there were some Hindu devotees who exhibited this feature. Baba invariably discountenanced it in every case. It is neither necessary nor possible or desirable to narrate all the experiences I had with Baba or in reference to Baba. Baba's kindness and provision for my welfare knew no limits. His methods of help were various and depended on the nature of the devotee concerned and the attendant circumstances. In my case, I had experience of all forms of his help. The first method of help in this, when we were in difficulties or when Baba wants us to take a particular course, the inspiration comes to us that that course should be adopted, and we have also the feeling that the inspiration comes from Baba. If I am wanted at a very extraordinary time to go to Baba for private and solitary communion, the call within is enough to indicate it. This first method relates to inspirations when we are awake. The second method is to give the suggestion or indication or idea in dreams or trances, sometimes through Baba's personal appearance. This, of course, is the most impressive and unmistakable method. A third method is where Baba directs us to go to some third person for a solution or hint. Sometimes it happens that the third person is totally unfit to understand the difficulty or the solution. Yet the solution is given by that man without knowing what the problem is and what the solution is and how he is benefiting us. He is a mere peg to hang the solution on. Baba has helped me in all these and other ways and gave me valuable training alike when he was in the body and after he left it. I regard Sri Sai Baba as the same spirit as Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, and one instance of the help he has given me recently through this perception of identity may be mentioned. Some 8 years back, I went to Dakshineshwar to see the places and things of interest. I got the service of a local man to act as my Cicerone, and he showed me the Kali figure that Paramahamsa worshipped and other images. I looked at Kali standing outside the worship room and passed on. I was anxious to see the tiny image of Ramlal that sported as a living boy with Paramahamsa and told my guide to show me Ramlal. He took me to one of the temples and showed me a huge image and said, "This is Ramlal." I said it could not be. The man replied that he as a local man should know and that I as a stranger could not possibly be better informed. I had to apologize and I wondered what to think of the Ramlal I had read about him in Paramahamsa's life. Just at this juncture, a pujari of these temples came and inquired if I was from Deccan. I replied I was. Then he said he would show me round Kali and every other image at close quarters and with full details. I said I had just seen them. Then he insisted on my visiting them again. He did not want any money from me. The reason for his persistent request was that he had been instructed in a dream overnight that a devotee from Deccan would be coming on the following day and that he was to take him to all the images and help him to worship them. Thus assured, I followed him. He took me inside the Garbhagriha, the holy of holies of Kali, and said I was free to touch the image and worship as I liked. Next he said that he would show me Ramlal. I said I had been shown a huge figure as Ramlal by my guide. The pujari rated by Cicerone for deceiving me and then took up the tiny image of Ramlal that Paramahamsa had played with and placed it on my lap. Thus all my expectations were fulfilled beyond measure, all through the grace of Sai, who is no other than Ramakrishna. The great favor Sainath had conferred on me by taking me so close to him and loving me, and by my loving him, had its reflections in the way in which some eminent living saints treated me. Madhavnath Maharaj, often seen at Pune and elsewhere, who passed away a month or two back, was seen by me in 1927. Maharaj, without being told of me, spotted out my connection with Sai and said I was Sai Baba's man. He narrated me the exact words that passed between me and Baba at our first interview, and he added that he was then present, that is, of course, in invisible spirit form or as Sai Baba.